Hello there, I am Michelle, and we're going to talk about the kinesiology of the forearm and hands. You probably saw the video about the kinesiology of the shoulder and the upper arm in a previous video. I'm just going to keep going down to the forearm and the hand. Just go through and talk about the actions, origins, and insertions, and where to find them on our own bodies. Make it straightforward, find it on your own body. Let's just do it. The reason that I'm here presenting this is because when I was on my MBLEx study journey, I found that I can't just look at books to memorize things. I need to be able to listen to it and integrate it into my life or watch a video about it. But usually listening is the best thing for me. So I would put on a YouTube video or a podcast, put on my headphones, and I would be doing things and thinking about the things or just work it out while I was listening to it. Just looking at books doesn't work for me for studying. And I want to provide that information to you, exactly what you need to know and nothing more. So real quick before we get started talking about all the muscles of the forearm and hand, I want to remind you that I have a study guide and a 100 question practice test for you already ready to go. In the description below this video, also in my About page here on YouTube, you will find a link that will take you to those free resources. You just put in your email and it will send that to you. No pressure about anything else. They're free for you to print up and use or have on your device and be able to look up everything that you need to know and nothing more. Okay, so we're just going to go ahead and get started. What you're going to get from this webinar is you're going to figure out the muscles, the attachments, and the actions. You're not going to get bony structures, range of motion testing, and pathology for individual muscles. And if this sounds useful to you, stick around to the end. Make sure and subscribe before I forget. So we're going to talk about categories of what you need to know for the movement of the muscles and the movements of the hands. Okay. So the first thing you need to know before we start talking about the actions is what does extrinsic and intrinsic mean? Okay, so extrinsic, when it's pertaining to the muscles of the hands and the forearm, is the muscles that exist up here and go down into your hand. They attach up here mostly. Some of them are over here too, but they're not in the hand. That's extrinsic, outside, extra. Intrinsic are the muscles that only exist in your hand. They don't have attachments that go up into the forearm. So that's what it means. Now we're going to talk about the actions of the forearm and hand before we start going through each of the muscles. These are the things that you need to know. Radio-ulnar joint. Those are two joints. They're two joints, okay? It's not just one joint. There's a joint up at the top and the proximal part of the forearm. You'll find a radio-ulnar joint where the two attach. And then at the distal end, the two attach again. They do basically one motion, but we have two names for it. When you're turning up, it's supination because you're holding your soup bowl. And when you're pronating, you're spilling your soup bowl. That's a radio-ulnar. Radio-ulnar. I always remember because the radio is the index finger and thumb, and the ulnar is the pinky side. Okay, so then we have the radiocarpal joint. Most of the wrist, I think the ulna attaches to the radius right in here. So most of the wrist is the radius, and all the carpal attach to the radius right there. So that's your wrist joint. And you have, let's see, two sets of movements. You have extension and flexion. Extension, high five. Flexion, I'm tired. High five, I'm tired. Okay. Radial and ulnar deviation. So the deviation's where it goes side to side, right? Hold your arm steady and you can do side to side. Radial deviation or abduction. The radius side is where your index finger and your thumb are. Then you're deviating to the radius side. And you're deviating to the ulnar side when you're doing the pinky side. Another way to look at it is adduction is toward the center line, where we hold our hand in anatomical position. Adduction is toward the center line, and then abduction is away from the center line. We have joints in our fingers. So we have the metacarpals, which are the long bones in here, and then we have the phalanges. At each of these sections, there's going to be a name. It's intuitive. It's very clear. This is the radiocarpal joint because it's the carpals and the radius. And then at the metacarpal joint is where the metacarpals attach to the carpals. That's the only one is the thumb, where it attaches directly to where your metacarpal attaches directly to that. Otherwise, we don't get a whole lot of movement in the palm. So most of it's going to be at that metacarpal phalangeals, where most of your movement's going to be in the other fingers, in the second through fifth fingers. Flexion, you're grabbing something. Extension, you're letting it go. Goodbye, hello, goodbye. Okay. Metacarpal phalangeal. That's a metacarpal phalangeal. Metacarpal phalangeal. Okay. Is this where the fingers are bending? Second through fifth. Okay. So I'm just mostly talking about this second through fifth. Metacarpal phalangeal, interphalangeal. Flexion and extension. Flexion, extension. Okay, so now for the first finger, that's your thumb. Your movements are going to be a little bit counterintuitive because we would think that just like our arms, we do abduction and adduction. This is a little bit different. Instead of abduction being the thumb away, abduction is actually the thumb away from the midline this way. I don't know why they do that, but it really confused me when I was a student. So abduction is going to be away from the body like this. You're going to grab something, right? So away from the hand is abduction. Adduction is bringing it back. You might be able to even bring it back even further, like me. But then flexion is going to be toward the pinky, and extension is going to be away. Flexion and extension. And then we have opposition, which is where you're like going to touch any of the other fingers. Okay. And then I wanted to talk about how to identify on the arm where the flexors, the landmarks of the flexors and extensors are for the extrinsic muscles. So we have the ulnar ridge. You can feel the bone right there. So your pinky finger, and you just run your hand down, you can feel that bone. And that's going to separate toward the thumb, toward the radius. That's going to separate the flexors from the extensors. So the back of your hand, the posterior side, the dorsal side, those are going to be extensor muscles. And everything on the plantar side is going to be your flexors. And then the dividing line is going to be your brachioradialis muscle. I'm doing a little radial deviation, adduction, and I can feel that muscle pop right there. That muscle is going to separate the flexors from the extensors. So those are the landmarks that we're looking at. Anything on this side is going to be a flexor. Everything on this side is going to be an extensor. And with that, we're going to get started on individual muscles. So I want to get started with pronators and supinators. Those are like some bigger groups rather than the fingers. So we're looking at the radial ulnar joint movements. Two muscles that do pronating, one of them being pronator tiri, which comes out of the common extensor tendon. So on the back side, on our medial epicondyle, there's going to be a big tendon. You can feel the epicondyle. There's a big tendon there and a bunch of bumpy bumps coming off of that big leathery tendon that comes off the bone. The first one is pronator teres. That helps you turn your hand to spill your soup, right? So pronator teres starts there and it inserts, that's the origin, it inserts on the middle lateral surface of the radius. So it starts on the ulna side and it wraps around the middle lateral surface. So it's going to be about halfway down on the lateral surface, anatomical position. So it's going to be on the inside, about in the middle of the ulna, of the radius, I mean. So it wraps around this way. And also anything that's attached a little bit to This medial epicondyle helps to flex the elbow. It assists in that process. They're not the prime movers like biceps brachii. Pronator quadratus. So we have the two different pronators. So there's the one that comes here, then we have one that's down here, and it's on the medial anterior surface. It's on the inside, on the flexor side of the ulna. So it starts there, and then it goes over to the lateral anterior surface of the distal radius. So it goes from, here's the ulna, and it's on the anterior side, which is the palmar side. So it goes down here like that, okay? Do it this way again. Zoop, zoop, just like a little muscle right there. Helps you to be able to turn your hand downward. Supinator. There's only one for supinating. Only one muscle for turning your hand this way, which is really interesting. I think one of those elbow flexors also helps with supination. Can't remember which one it was. You can put it in the comments for me. Thank you. Okay, so supinator starts at the lateral epicondyle, which is the outside one. Lateral? Maybe I was pointing at the medial one. You guys can correct me. The supinator starts at the lateral epicondyle, and the radial collateral ligament. There's a ligament here that holds the radius in, the annular ligament, and the supinator crest of the ulna. It stretches across this area. It inserts on the anterior lateral surface of the proximal 1/3 of the radial shaft. Anterior lateral surface. It starts here and it goes like this, and when it tightens, it forces the muscle to do that, okay? So it goes across here. It forces you to do that. So go ahead and find it. Twist your arm, you can feel it. Okay? You can feel that muscle just like bing, engage. Just do the movement over and over again. Okay, now we're going to look at the extrinsic extensors. The extrinsic muscles are the ones that are on the outside of the hand, going up the arm, and these are the ones that help you to extend your wrist and your fingers. Wrist, radiocarpal joint, fingers, metacarpal, and interphalangeal joints. So we have radialis, longus, and brevis. When we look at these names, this is how I categorized these muscles. Like, I could be totally overwhelmed by the muscles listed that I'm looking at when I'm doing my MBLEx. When I was doing my MBLEx, I could be totally overwhelmed. But I know when it's extensor, it's a muscle that extends. When it's carpi, it's in the wrist because of the carpals. And radialis, I know that it's on this side of the hand. So I have an idea of generally where this muscle is going to be because it's an extensor, so it's going to be on this side, on the dorsal side of the arm. It's going to be on the radial side. And that's basically, and carpi means it bends the wrist. So I know what the muscle is going to do just by the name. Isn't that cool? There are so many little muscles in the forearm and hand that it could be really overwhelming, but fortunately they were named. We've decided names that make things easy. So the long one, there's a long one, which is longus, and the short one, which is brevis. I'm gonna expand this so I can see it better. Okay, so longus starts at the distal 1/3 of the lateral supracondylar ridge of the humerus. So humerus here, lateral supracondylar ridge, which is, so we have the epicondyle, and we're going to go up the epicondyle, and we can feel where it would be attaching. Just up, and then it makes a little divot, and we can feel that. What's the movement we're going to do? We're going to extend the wrist. I can feel a little bump. That's the tendon working. So it's going to start here. Distal is away from the body. Distal 1/3. So it's going to be in this whole area. 1/3 of the ridge. And then it goes to the base of the second metacarpal. What's the second? 1, 2. So it would be the base of the pointy finger. it goes to the dorsal side to extend, and the base of that metacarpal is going to be right in here on the pointy finger. You can feel the ridge here. If I go to extend, I can feel a little bump of the tendon, and that's going to be my extensor carpi radialis longus. And then the brevis one ends at the base of the third metacarpal, which is your middle finger. If you do a little extension, you can feel that. And it starts at the common extensor tendon of the lateral epicondyle. So it's an extensor, so it starts at the lateral epicondyle, and if I do a little extensor, I can feel it bump. If I extend my wrist, bump, bump. Okay. What else does it do? Because both of these muscles are on the radial side, it will help you to do an abduction of the wrist or radial deviation away from the body, and it also helps to flex the elbow because it's in this structure. So it helps to flex the elbow as well. Extensor digitorum, what do we know from this name? It extends the digits, not the thumb, just the second through fifth fingers. That's where the insertion is. It's on the base of the middle and distal phalanges. So it attaches here and here on these two joints, on the bases of those, right at the bottom of the knuckle to extend. The origin is in that common extensor tendon. Remember we talked about where that leathery spot is just below the lateral epicondyle. There's going to be an extender there. As we're going down, we're going to. We're identifying each of the muscles that are on the superficial layer of that tendon coming off of the lateral epicondyle. It helps to extend the wrist at the radiocarpal joint, and extensor digitorum also helps to extend those fingers. So it helps us to be able to go, okay? And then we have extensor carpi ulnaris, which is the ulnar side. So once again, starting at the lateral epicondyle of the humerus, the common extensor tendon comes off of there, but this time it's going to attach at the base of the fifth metacarpal. It helps to extend the wrist also. So all of these, this extensor tendon helps all the wrist movements. Everything coming off of it makes the wrist extend, right? And it also helps to ulnar deviate or adduct the wrist. So yeah, we got that from the name carpi, wrist, right? The carpal joint. So we got that extending and on the ulnar side. So we know a lot about this muscle just from the name. And so now we're going to get closer to the individual fingers, the extensor indicis. So index finger, I talked in a previous video about how we know it's the index finger because it indexes things. This is a muscle that helps you to extend your pointy finger. And the muscle starts at the posterior surface. Everything on the extensor side is going to be on the posterior side in the anatomical position. So posterior surface of the distal shaft of the ulna. If you squeeze into the middle of your arm, you can feel the little space. That's where your interosseous membrane is. So it attaches to the distal part right there. And then it attaches to the extensor digitorum. We were talking about how the tendons of the extensor digitorum goes up into the top of the fingers and helps you to be able to do this. Well, the extensor indicis attaches to the extensor digitorum at the second metacarpal. So it helps you to do that. You can feel it, just that muscle bump. The other ones don't bump. When you do this, you can feel and see the tendon pop up, the tendon of the extensor indicis. So it helps you to extend the wrist, extend the second finger, and adduct the second finger, adding to the rest of the group. And so metacarpal phalangeal joint is here. Metacarpal phalanges, right there. Boop. Metacarpal phalanges. Repeating myself just because is good for us. Okay, extensor digiti minimi. So if this is the extensor indicis digiti minimi, which do you think is the minimi digiti? That's your little pinky finger. Okay, so anything with minimi on it is going to have to do with your pinky finger. Indicis, minimi, and pollicis. All right, giving you some clues here in the names. So the muscle that extends your pinky finger has its origins in that common extensor tendon. Okay, let me just pop that and see if I can feel a little bump. I do in that lateral epicondyle tendon. Feel it right there. Okay, so it inserts at the base of the proximal phalanx and the middle phalanx of the fifth finger. So let's count the joints. This is the proximal phalanx, the first one. And this is the middle phalanx, and this is the distal phalanx. Proximal phalanx, middle phalanx, distal phalanx. All right. So the base here and the base of the middle one, the base of the proximal and the base of the middle one. When we hold it, we can feel a little bump. It extends the fifth finger and also helps with wrist extension and adduction or ulnar deviation. We're still working on extrinsic muscles of the wrist and digits, but this time we're going into the thumbs. Extrinsic muscles that do things in the thumb, but go up into the arm. We do have a bunch of muscles that are intrinsic that do things for the thumb, but we're going to start with the extensor side because we're still on the theme of extensors. So we have extensor, pollicis, longus, and brevis. And remember the movements, the actions that we have with the thumb is if we go backward, which is like the extensor, right? In the fingers, going backward is extending, but that's not the way it works with the thumb. Extending with the thumb is going away from the body this way, okay? Going away from the body this way is what extending for the thumb. So keep that in mind when you're considering this. Longus and brevis, that means the short one and the long one, okay? Extending the thumb. Longus attaches on the posterior surface of the ulna. So posterior is on the back. Posterior surface of the ulna, that's this side, and interosseous membrane. So it's going to be attaching here. I think I feel a little bit, it's really deep in there because it attaches in the interosseous membrane. So it's really deep in there. And like, I feel like I should feel it. Try not to hold the back. I feel it right there. I feel it right there. Okay, so that's the longus, and the brevis starts at the posterior surface of the radius. And I definitely feel that one right there. Okay, and then they insert, the longus inserts at the base of the distal phalanx. So we're going to talk about the different phalanxes. We feel the first knuckle would be where the metacarpal attaches to the carpals. We've got the proximal phalanx and the distal phalanx. We don't have a middle one for the thumb. The base of the proximal phalanx is here, and the base of the distal is here. Longus attaches to the distal one, and brevis attaches to the base of the proximal one. The extensor pollicis longus extends the thumb at the interphalangeal joint. So if we hold everything still, that's extensor longus. It's longus. How many hands do you have to feel this? You can feel it on your friend because you'll have an extra hand to do that. And then they both extend the thumb to say, great job. And they both help to abduct the wrist at the radiocarpal joint, which is abduction is radial deviation. Okay, abductor pollicis longus. Remember, abduction is going away this way. Okay, so going away this way. And so it starts at the posterior surface of the radius and ulna. It's in here, and the interosseous membrane, and it goes to the base of the first metacarpal. So it's the back of the hand, and it comes around and goes here. Abduct. And so it pulls this way. It starts here, and it pulls this way when the fibers contract. It wraps around this way and attaches right here at the base of the first metacarpal. Pulls that way. And then going from extension and abduction to flexing, which is this way, and that is going to be on the anterior surface. The muscle is going to be on the anterior surface. It attaches to the radius, this side, and interosseous membrane, and it pulls your thumb inward by attaching to the base of the distal phalanx down here. So it attaches here, and it's really deep in there because it's attaching into the interosseous membrane, but you can barely feel a little deep in there. And then it's going to attach in there. Okay. And then, let's see. So flex the thumb at the interphalangeal joint, at the metacarpal phalangeal joint, and the carpometacarpal phalangeal joint. So there and there, all three of those, and it helps to flex the wrist as well. Flexor carpi radialis. I'll go into the flexors. The extrinsic flexors of the arm and wrist, hands. Flexor carpi radialis. Flex at the wrist on the radial side. That's in the name. If you put yourself in anatomical position, just as with the lateral side, there is a common tendon. There's a common tendon on the flexor side as well, which is the medial epicondyle of the humerus. Feel it? That's where the common tendon is. All right. So flexor carpi radialis starts there, and then it goes down and attaches to the base of the second and third metacarpals. This is like the carpi radialis of the extensors too, which is really interesting because we have brevis and longus, which attaches to the second and third. And then we have just flexor carpi radialis, which attaches just to the second and third. So both of those do that, second and third. And so they have the strongest wrist flexion. Really interesting, huh? Metacarpals. Oh, right there. I had my fingers here, but it's actually there. Metacarpals are here. So it attaches there so that your wrist can flex and also so it can abduct, radial deviate, and assist with flexing the elbow. Palmaris longus is a really interesting muscle because not everybody has it. About a quarter of the population, a third of females and a quarter of males don't even have it. It's this muscle that helps you to be able to flex your hand. It attaches to the fascia of your hand inside and helps you to be able to grab things. And it starts out, once again, at that common flexor tendon on the medial epicondyle. There you go. You can feel it. And then it attaches deep inside the hand. You can see in the image, like the forks coming off of it. It's like a tendinous kind of web that goes right there. And it helps you to tense your fascia and flex your wrist. It doesn't really help with finger flexion at all. It helps with the opposition to be able to grab things and flex your wrist and elbow because it's on that lateral epicondyle. So we have radius on this side, we had palmaris in the middle, and then we have ulnaris on the pinky side. It has two heads. Instead of it being like a longus and brevis, it's just one muscle that has two heads. Let's start with the insertion first, which is on the pisiform, hook of the hamate, and the base of the fifth metacarpal. So we're going to go ahead and start with the insertion where it attaches at the hand because we know that it comes up here and ends up on the pinky side. We're going to start with that insertion at the base of the fifth metacarpal, your pinky finger, and the hook of the hamate, pisiform, and then it comes up and it attaches to that common flexor tendon, which is on this side. It goes common flexor tendon. It also attaches to the proximal surface of this part of the ulna. It helps with flexing the wrist and ulnar deviation. And it also helps flex the elbow because it's attached to that medial epicondyle. All right, so now we're getting into finger flexion. So we have the extensor digitorum for finger extension, and now we're doing flexor digitorum for finger flexion. We've got the superficial one, and then we also have the profundus. Okay, so flexor digitorum superficialis starts, it webs over. It's this broad flexor muscle. So when you go to flex your fingers, you can feel a big, broad muscle lighting up. That's your flexor digitorum. That's the belly of it. And it's thin and flat, wrapping over that, all of the other muscles. So it's really superficial. That's why they call it superficialis. There you go. The name has everything, and that is amazing. So it attaches to the flexor tendon of the medial epicondyle, the ulnar collateral ligament, the coronode process of the ulna, the interosseous membrane, the proximal shaft of the radius. So it just webs all over in here, and it inserts in the sides of the middle phalanges of the 2nd through 5th fingers. This is the middle phalanges, and it attaches there to help bend those fingers. Okay, so those are the middle phalanges. Flexes the wrist at the radiocarpal joint, and it flexes at the interphalangeal joints and the metacarpal phalangeal joints. Flexor digitorum profundus is what makes those tiny little end ones bend, okay? Because it inserts at the bases of the distal phalanges. It inserts at the base of the tiny little tippy fingers to help you to be able to go. That's profundus. And if I had another hand, I'd be reaching up here. But you could do this on your friend and see if you can feel it pop when you reach up to the anterior and medial surfaces of the proximal 3/4 of the ulna. So that's up here. Ulna, right? Proximal, up high, 3/4. So you should be able to feel it. Anterior and medial surfaces, which is like the front and toward the center. Try it out. See if you can feel it. So medial would be here. All right. So there's the ulna. So it would be somewhere in here that you'd feel it attaching at its origin. And it also helps you flex the wrist. Moving into the intrinsic muscles of the hand. So we're not doing the radiocarpal joint anymore. We're getting into what makes you be able to move your fingers. These intrinsic muscles for just your hands are broken into the thenar and hypothenar muscles. And we're going to start with the hypothenar muscles, which is the muscles that help our pinky to be able to move inward and outward. So look at me. Yeah, I can do that because of my hypothenar muscles. So flexor digiti minimi brevis, the small muscle that makes your small finger flex. The small muscle that makes your small finger flex. So flexing is like this, remember, not adducting. We're flexing it, just that one. So it starts at the hook of the hamate, and it also attaches to the flexor retinaculum. That's that leathery sheet that goes over the flexor side of carpal bones. It attaches here, and it goes up to the base of the proximal phalanx of the 5th finger, just above the knuckle of the metacarpal joint. It flexes the 5th finger at the metacarpal phalangeal joint, and it assists in that. Can you do that? How strong is your abductor digiti minimi? So it attaches at the pisiform and flexor carpi ulnaris. So it comes, the tendon of the flexor carpi ulnaris, which is over here in this area, right? There's a flexor tendon, or there's a tendon where the flexor carpi ulnaris does this, right? It attaches up here, comes up. Anyway, flexor carpi ulnaris attaches here, and that's between the pisiform to stabilize it. That tendon It attaches in this area. That's where it starts. It comes up to the proximal phalanx, and it's on the ulnar surface, on the outside, the lateral side, right? It helps you to be able to do that. So it comes here and goes up to there and helps you to be able to move your finger outward. Abduction of the fifth finger and assists with that as well. It needs both because it needs to be able to bring the finger inward like that. Now the opponent's digiti minimi helps us to be able to grab things, grab that doorknob, and it starts at the hook of the hamate, which is a bit more inward, and comes up to the shaft of the fifth metacarpal on the ulnar surface. So it's like inward like this, and it helps to be able to pull the whole finger over like that. So whereas adductor starts here and it pulls outward, this the tiniest little change in the angle, and you end up with a pull this way. And that's that pinky finger opposing. That's the one that confused me. Okay, so now we're going to work on the thenar muscles. Those are those thumb muscles. Okay, so we went from the hypothenar muscles, and now we're going to work on the thenar muscles, learn all about those, and not very many more slides left to go, not very many more muscles to go through. So we have flexor, pollicis, brevis. Remember, flexing is like this when it comes to the thumb. So we've got two heads for that muscle. The superficial head, which is more on the surface, attaches to that flexor retinaculum. That's that leathery sheet that goes over the carpal bones right there. So superficial head starts there. The deep head attaches to the trapezium, the trapezoid, and the capitate, which are those deep carpal bones. Then the insertion attaches to the base of the proximal phalanx of the thumb and brings that thumb inward. It doesn't help to do that. It just brings that thumb inward like this. Okay? Let's see. Flex the thumb and opposition. And then opponent's pollicis, which is the actual opposition part. It also attaches to the flexor retinaculum and the tubercle of the trapezium, but it goes up the entire length of the first metacarpal bone. So it's another muscle that helps you to be able to bring just the whole thing in. It just brings the whole bone in, just like this, okay? So opposition of the thumb is bringing the whole bone in. And then adductor, adducting, bringing the thumb back or adding it back to the hand, starts at the second and third metacarpals over here and a little bit of the capitate, and it goes over to the base of the proximal phalanx of the thumb, and it helps you to be able to bring your thumb into alignment. So just like that, squeeze it back up into place. It helps to flex the thumb. It also helps to adduct the thumb. Abductor, bring the thumb away from the hand. Attaches to the flexor retinaculum, the trapezium, and the scaphoid. The insertion is the base of the proximal phalanx of the thumb, and it helps you to bring it away. It helps with this. It's all about grabbing things, because that's what increases our chances of survival, being able to use our opposable thumbs. My poor dog, my poor cat, they're like, we can't open our food packages. We wouldn't survive without you because of this. Cats and dogs. Just a couple more left. Oh my God, we're so close. Lumbricals, we need them. They attach to the surfaces of the flexor digitorum profundus tendons. So they attach in here, okay? And then they insert on the extensor lumbricals. So they're on the flexor side and on the extensor side, and they grow through, and they attach to the extensor aponeurosis on the dorsal side of the phalanges. So there's going to be an extensor aponeurosis here, and they help you to be able to do this. Extend the fingers at the interphalangeal joints. Thank you, lumbricals, for helping us to be able to do that. And they help to flex this way. Ooh, that's tricky. Thank you, lumbricals, for making me be able to do that. And then we have the interossea, the application I was creating all of those other images for didn't have interossei on there. But I just wanted to go over it because I'm doing all the muscles of the fingers and hands, so I might as well do it. Those all exist between the metacarpals, and they stretch over into the bases of the fingers. And they help you to be able to abduct the second through fourth fingers. So they help you to be able to do that at the metacarpal phalangeal joint, okay? And on the palmar side, they help you to be able to do this. Thank you very much. And then our opponents and our minimi help us to be able to extend or abduct those fingers. But your interossei help you to be able to do that. And they help you to flex and extend your fingers, just like the lumbricals. I'm so glad that you made it through. That means the information I had for you was beneficial. So make sure and subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. And if you want some of those free resources, the free printable, downloadable study guide and 100 question practice test, they're in the description below. In the practice test, you can set a timer and answer all the questions. And then separately, you have your answers all explained thoroughly, not only why I chose the correct answers, but also why I didn't choose the other ones. So you're learning just as much from what you didn't get right as what you did get right. At the very end, you circle all of the answers wrong in the key that I have will help you figure out which area you need to study more. If you missed more in benefits and effects, then you need to study more in that, or if you missed more in ethics or anatomy and physiology. Go ahead and download all of that. Take that test, get that study guide so you find out exactly what you need to know. Keep an eye out for future videos. I'm not sure what topic's coming up next, but just keep an eye out, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye.